Hi there, and welcome to the Main Idea podcast. I want to start with a few questions for our listeners first. One, do you have pockets of excellent teaching at your school, but not excellent teaching across the board? And two, do you have some, or perhaps many teachers who get burnt out as the year goes on? I ask because I have a guest today who's going to talk about a specific type of instructional rounds, that is teachers observing teachers, that she developed that actually addresses both of these problems and more. But it addresses both the burnout and the pockets of excellent teaching that we often see in schools. Her version of instructional rounds is a very powerful strategy that you can implement in your school for teacher professional learning that truly taps into the expertise that's right there in your building, no expensive consultant needed, and helps that expertise spread like wildfire. And this same strategy ends up building a strong culture and sense of trust among your teachers. This is why I'm here today and what I'm going to talk about with our guest. I am Jen David Lang, and my passion is helping school leaders learn. I read lots of education and leadership books, and I save you time by sharing only the most compelling and impactful books with you. So today I have one of those books, and in fact, it's the book that clearly explains how to launch and sustain this type of professional learning strategy. And I'm here with Vicki WIlson to discuss the main ideas of her book, Lead with Instructional Rounds, Creating a Culture of Professional Learning. And if you think, oh, I've tried getting teachers to observe each other, it doesn't work, don't turn off the podcast. Actually, this is for you because you'll hear how Vicki got 100% of her teachers to participate in these instructional rounds, even though she made it voluntary. Vicki WIlson is a Michigan leader. And once I fell in love with her book, I started asking the school and district leaders I work with in my mastermind about her, and they all know her. She's that kind of dynamic leader who has a big impact in all of Michigan and elsewhere. She has over 30 years of experience in education, first teaching for 14 years, and then becoming a principal in Wyandotte, Michigan up until 2023. She transformed that school into a nationally recognized model PLC school, and she pioneered a strengths-based approach to instructional rounds, which is what she describes in this book and what we're about to discuss. She's really passionate about making schools less siloed. I don't know if that's the correct use of less isolated so that educators can actually learn from each other, celebrate each other's strengths, and build collective teacher efficacy, which is at the top of Hattie's list of what works in schools. In fact, I'm going to feature Jenny Donahue's book on collective teacher efficacy. I'm sure you all know her work. Anyway, today, Vicki partners with schools across the US, actually across the world, helping them transform their structures of isolation toward cultures of collaboration, something I believe we've always needed, but which I think we particularly need right now because of the issues of burnout I mentioned earlier and the stress that schools are going through. So I'm very excited to talk about this uplifting yet very practical approach to instructional rounds that improves instruction, collaboration, and school culture. So welcome to the show, Vicki.
Thank you, Jen. I'm so excited to be here.
So glad you're here. Thanks for taking the time. Let's start with the story you told in the book about when you became the principal of the school in Wyandotte, Michigan. What type of school culture did you inherit, and what ideas did you have about transforming that culture?
Yeah, it's kind of our origin story for Lead with Instructional Rounds, if you will. So I became a principal in 2007 of the school that I had been working at for a few years. I'd been in a couple different school districts and a couple different schools. So this school I had been at for 3 years and became that school's principal, which gave me that lens of having been a colleague with the teachers at my school and now being a principal who is particularly interested in being an instructional leader and anxious to get into classrooms and look at teaching and learning and have conversations with teachers about student learning and what they're seeing in the classroom. So that was kind of my journey of learning on how to give feedback and how to grow with my teachers. And I started going into classrooms right away, super excited. And I went into the first classroom and was really taken aback because I was like, wow, I had no idea this teacher could do this thing so well.
Mm.
And then I go into another classroom and again, I'm like, oh my gosh, I had no idea this teacher could do this thing so well. And I just started to think about the opportunity out there to be a fly on the wall in the classrooms of those that we're working with to learn and grow together. And I had no idea how to do it, but that's what was in my head at that time. And I was also thinking about how we don't talk about we don't like go in the staff room and say, hey, let me tell you about this really great thing that I just did in my lesson this morning. And we just don't naturally do that. And we don't often go into classrooms and just look at teaching and learning. It's usually to borrow something or something like that. So I had no idea how to do it, started reading a lot, started
Mhm.
reading about instructional rounds out of Harvard, started reading Marzano's work about being a reflective teacher. And there's pieces I liked out of different things. Like I really like the structure of a system-wide approach to do this collaboratively with a group of teachers, because on top of just seeing it and being like, wow, I didn't notice this great thing that was happening, but then to be able to talk about it with other educators would take it up to that reflective level too. So it was a blend of all those things. I
Mhm.
did not execute that for
Mhm.
probably maybe 6 years. It was just percolating my mind. What ended up happening is 2 years after I became a principal, that school that I had been working at was going to close. And we would be merging that school with another elementary school in our city and bringing these two full teams together. The two schools were very, very polar opposite, different in the way they worked and in culture and mindset. So when we started to bring these two schools together, there was a lot of friction between the two
Mhm.
schools. So I would say that first year was took about 5 years off my life. I would say just trying to
I
get the
don't see any
two.
gray hairs.
I cover it. It's there, I promise.
You're so honest.
I know to a fault. That's true. Um, but it was really hard because I was starting to go in again, kind of going back to that first year principal lens and seeing greatnesses in both groupings of teachers, but they were functioning and operating very different. And there were definitely tension between the two. So a couple years into that merger, I finally um decided we were working with some teachers and trying to get a math workshop going, and the teachers asked me, can we get into each other's classrooms? And I said, yes, we will, but I want to try something too. So we're going to try it in an instructional rounds approach where we go in a group and we're going to see a math workshop happening, and then we're going to talk about the positives we see in that and how can we leverage that and apply that into our own classroom. So the teachers asking me to do that was that launch I finally needed.
Mhm.
And the best part is they saw what I saw in my first
Mhm.
year of being a principal. Like we went in with that strength focused mindset. What are the positive practices we're seeing that are having an impact on student learning? And we would just dialogue about it and talk about teaching, learning, the impact it had. And we kept those conversations focused on the positive things we were seeing, knowing that we are imperfect people in a room of imperfect children, and all that's fine and good. But where are we seeing really strong practices, and where are we seeing the strengths of this teacher come through so that I can learn and grow from that and do things differently in my classroom? So
Can I
that was
pause you there? Because there's a lot.
origin
There's
story.
a
I
lot.
know.
There's a lot there, and just it so well. So I want to unpack it for people who are, hearing this for the first time. So let me
Thank you
just
for
pull out
pausing
a
me because I go
few.
on and on sometimes.
So can I. So all right, let me highlight a few of the things that you already said, right? So first of all, you went in as a new principal and said, "Wow, look at this great thing this teacher's doing. Wow, look at this amazing thing this other teacher's doing." So that's on us as leaders, right, to focus on what's good, because there are always a million things that need to be improved, right? No one has cracked this teaching nut, right? We all have things to improve. So that strengths-based mindset of the leader, that's great. And then the you're highlighting the irony of the fact that it's the principal and maybe some coaches and or assistant principals who observe all the great teaching, right?
Right,
And then
right,
we're not teaching. So we get all these great ideas and we see all this great, and the best we can do is maybe try to share it, here or there, but really the people who should be observing for great ideas are the people who are teaching. So that's another thing you said, right? And then the third, you said people, don't stand around the cooler sharing, this is a great thing I did. I have found teachers to be some of the most humble people I know, when really we need them to brag. And that's really hard to get people to do. So it's what we need. So what you said by looking for something that was a system-wide approach gives people a structure to do that. So they don't feel like they're bragging, but they're able to share what they're doing in their classrooms and have people take away the positives. So I think those are a few key elements that you said that I wanted to highlight. Oh, and then the other one is you didn't do this for 6 years. So,
yeah,
just the idea that newer leaders or leaders who are newer to a building may need to take some time. It's not necessarily something to jump into. And you were sort of open and percolating. And then when these math teachers were open to it, that's when you started. So before I do want to get into your launch story, because that's a good one too. But first, just so people can visualize what we're talking about, the endpoint. So in its final form, can you give a sense of what does the morning and afternoon look like? What are the time frames? Who is observing, the numbers? Can you just paint the picture so that people can
yeah,
visualize what you're talking about?
yeah. And this can be flexible too, but I'll walk you through typically what it looked like for me is we start with a pre-meeting, and that's a really important piece for making the setting psychologically safe for teachers to go into each other's classrooms. So we start with a pre-meeting where we share the agreements that we've already made as a staff and review those. And so those agreements, like the most important being, we are going to go into our colleagues' classrooms and we're going to look for positive practices that we're seeing and instructional moves that the teacher's making. And we're also going to look for the impact that's having on student learning while we're in there. I always say the line that we are imperfect people in a room of imperfect people, and that kind of thing's real. So we're in there to look for what are those strengths that we're seeing happening with that educator and reflect on those and think about what it might look like in our own practice.
Can I
So that's the
read? Can I
pre-meeting.
read what you actually say? Because this
Yeah,
line blew me away. This line, this sort of changes how instructional rounds or walkthroughs, whatever you want to call them. But I have from your book in front of me the quote.
please.
So Vicki takes, I think you said about, four teachers who are going to observe
Out
for,
for.
but we'll
Yep.
talk about the numbers after. And every single time, not day one, not month one, month 10, Vicki always says this before she leads a group of teachers to observe another group of teachers. She says, and I quote, I would like to review our professional agreements. We will only speak of the positives in any and all post communication. We are all aware students all have imperfect moments. We know teachers have imperfect moments too. If it happens during one of our visits, we will not discuss it with anyone. We will not discuss it while we debrief. We will not talk about it in the staff room. We will not talk about it in the parking lot. We will honor our human right to make mistakes by understanding and letting them go. That
Yeah,
brings chills to my spine. That changes everything, right? We're
it
not going into
does.
classes to tell teachers, oh, you really should be spending more time on your wait time when you ask questions. No, it's what do we take that's positive, and we're not even going to talk about the critical side.
Right.
How did you come to that?
Um, I think that I in principal school, I feel like there's so much that we're taught about how to give critical feedback and how to look for what needs to change and grow. And it seems like that's how we're so designed to do things. And when I go back to my very first experience as a new teacher, and I'm so grateful and so lucky that I got to go into school with my own colleagues and be their principal, because I think I would have missed that whole opportunity to see that. Because if I didn't know them, I didn't know what I wouldn't know, right? But when I went into those classrooms, suddenly I realized what I didn't know from all the people that I had been working with. And I even thought back to, like, I had been in a whole different school district in Michigan, and I worked there for 9 years. And I had a best friend in that school. We taught the same grade level. She was right across the hall from me. And I was in her classroom so many times and sometimes pulling shenanigans. And I never sat in there and watched her teach and
Mm,
thought about it and
mm,
thought about the moves. And I was like, that was just 14 years of missed opportunities. Because this is the thing, and you said it, I don't know how you said it, but you're going to connect in a second here. um I 1 month after being a principal and going in classrooms, I would have been a better teacher.
yes.
1 month later,
Yep.
I had been a teacher for 14 years.
Yep.
But going into every one of my teachers' classrooms, suddenly I was going to be so much better because I was learning from what they were doing well
Yes.
in our school. And that's the thing. I knew I would be so much better if I went back into a classroom at that point.
That is
And
the
that's why I
beauty.
had to get them to do it.
Yeah, and to focus on what works. Someone recently said to me, "Oh, I like your podcast. You don't interrupt the guest." And now I have interrupted you twice.
Because I talk too
I hope
much.
that person is not listening to this one. But so I wanted you to paint the full picture of, like, okay, so you meet with the four or however many teachers and you give
Yeah.
the spiel that I just shared, and then what happens so they can see it.
So
Yeah.
we go through our agreements, and then I typically would have a schedule of 4 classrooms we would visit. And we'd go into classroom 1 for 10 minutes. That was it, 10 minutes. We arrive on time, we end on time. That's another way to make it safe for the teacher. They know exactly when we're coming. Um, and then we step outside of the classroom. So we just walk in, and we're in there looking at what's going really well in here. What are we seeing that's working well? What is the teacher doing to help kids with learning? And then as the facilitator, I'm in there thinking about what strength am I seeing that I can raise as a reflective question in the hallway in 10 minutes from now, so that we can have some really good dialogue about it. So I'm thinking of high leverage instructional practices that are being executed in a strong way.
Mhm.
And so my teachers know, and that's part of the agreements. When you see me walk out with me, and we stand right in the hallway, right outside that classroom. So if people are walking up and down the hallway, they can hear our conversation. We want to, it's not secret. It's going to be transparent. All of our talk is positive anyway. I make sure the door is propped open
Mhm.
of that classroom. I'll hold my foot there to make sure it's propped open, because I don't want them to feel like the door's closed. If
Yeah.
they stepped out and listened, they absolutely could. Um, and then I will pose a question that's open-ended and gets at, it might be around engagement, it might be around an instructional strategy, but where did we see that executed in a way that made an impact on student learning? And then I let them start talking. Sometimes I'm in there and I'll even look up what's the effect size of blah, blah, blah. And I'll throw that into the conversation, or in the way that I phrase that question. So it's 5 minutes. We have 5 minutes out there, and we start talking. About 3-4 minutes in, we start walking to the next classroom that we're scheduled for. So then another 10 minutes observation. We step outside, another reflective question, and 5 minutes of dialogue. And then classroom 3, classroom 4. When we're done, we go back to our initial meeting place.
So that's been an
And
hour, right? So it's been 10 minutes of observing
yeah,
and 5 minutes of debrief. That's 15 minutes per, host teacher. So that's 15 times. So that's an hour. So you've been with them for an hour and now.
yes. So now, and they usually take a little journal with them. We don't do clipboards or forms or anything like that. They take a little journal with them and they're writing down all these notes. So then we sit back around the table and I'll ask 2 questions at that point. And the first question, and this comes out of Marzano's reflective teacher work. The first question is, as a result of what you saw and heard today, in what ways were you validated for the work that you're doing in your classrooms? Because I want them to take a moment and feel positive about what they're doing. And again, that kind of feeds our feeling brain, so our thinking brain can be ready to grow. And so everybody round robins takes a turn and shares something that validated the work they're doing.
So meaning
And
like I saw the teacher using exit tickets and I know that I'm really good about, checking for understanding at the end of the lesson, something like that. That's what you mean by validation.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. And then I ask a second question, based on what you saw and heard today, what do you want to learn more about or try in your classroom from something you saw today? I often will say here, I know you've written a lot of things down, so I want you to say one thing. Like, what's the one thing that's really on the top of your mind of something you want to try as a result of something that you saw in someone's classroom today? And then they go around and share those ideas too. And we often will start talking or give additional ideas and support them in that. What might say, what will be your first step in doing that? Sometimes they go back and they want to go talk to that teacher more because it's quick. It's 10 minutes, 5 minutes. And they don't get really much talk time with that teacher. So oftentimes I'll see teachers going then later to find out more, ask more questions. So it really opens the door to collaborating and supporting each other, but it is all centered around what our strengths are.
And that longer after the 4 observations and mini feedback, how long is that longer debriefing where you ask these 2 questions about what in your teaching is are you validated about and what do you want, one thing you want to learn more? How long is that?
Depends on, usually I have 4-ish people around me.
Yeah.
Once we started doing this and it was comfortable and our
Yeah.
staff, that number might grow because if there were student teachers in the building, they always went on instructional rounds. So it would take about 20 minutes for that part. The whole thing takes, structured in that way with 4 classrooms, takes about an hour and a half to hour 40 minutes. I also have the teachers, after we do our 2 questions and round robin, share those. They write a note of validation to the 4 teachers that they observed. And I do prompt them to be real specific with it. What's something specific that you saw? And then share with that teacher what was the impact you saw that have on their students in their classroom, or what impact did that have on you as a colleague or as a teacher for your next steps.
That's amazing. You know what? There's so many things I like about your model. And then in the afternoon, you flip it, right? So the 4 host teachers become the 4 observers, right? It's the other way around. Is that correct?
It
Or another
can be
day?
that way, but sometimes it's just random. A lot of teachers want to experience it as an observer first, and they may not host for a few times into it. Really, you'll have some teachers that they're trailblazers and they just want to jump in and do it. And before you even finish saying what you want to try, they're like, I'll do it. So they usually end up being my first sets of hosts because they're ready for that. Others need to wait and watch, and they need to really have evidence that this truly is only going to be positive and this truly is not evaluative. So some teachers don't volunteer to host for even a year or so into the process when they feel comfortable. So we just kind of let them jump in when they're ready.
Well, let's talk about that. So one of the powerful things, and I said in the introduction, is that you got 100% of teachers to participate, but you made it voluntary.
Yeah.
And so can you share a little bit about when you launched it and you had an afternoon staff meeting with two agendas explaining about
Yeah.
the day that you launched it, and then also this whole idea that you allow teachers to observe without being the host teacher seems like such a safe way to see it in practice before committing to opening up your door, which is the vulnerable piece for
Yeah.
most teachers. So yeah, so tell us about how you launched it on that day with the staff meeting.
Yeah, so it happened to the day that we did it, it happened to be the same day that we had a staff meeting. Um, and even if it were a few days later, that would have been fine too. But around that idea of deprivatizing. So I had a group of teachers that wanted to do this and they were really interested in math workshop. And so we did it with them. We flipped it because I had just 4 teachers, I think, that were interested. And in that one, they were all kind of showing what they had figured out around their math workshop. At the end of, or at the staff meeting, well, I asked them ahead of time, actually, like, I'd like to share what's happening at our staff meeting if this all goes well. I've got a regular agenda for our meeting where I just had some professional learning planned. And I said, and I have another agenda that is an opportunity, like if you were an observer today, can you talk about what your experiences were? If you were a host today, can you talk about what your experiences were? So I kind of gave them a heads up, like I'd like to go with this agenda if this all works, because my fingers are crossed, and I didn't know if it would, but it was awesome. That first day was awesome. The teachers were super excited. They even the host teachers were like, I wasn't that nervous. Like I kept teaching. I was glad to have people in there. I couldn't wait to go into their classrooms. And so we just spent that whole staff meeting talking about it. And those people that didn't participate, um, most of them were ready by the next time we did it. That first year I did it, I did, I started it after Christmas time, so sometime in the winter, and we did 2 in the second part of the year. The next year I did 1 per quarter. So I did 4 instructional rounds on year 2. And then after that, we started doing them monthly, although I waited till October to start because I know everyone's setting up their classrooms.
Mhm.
I did a monthly. I think I did a May one and we realized that was a little bit too much into the school year. After that year, we stopped on April when state testing was coming in. Um, Several years later, I did push my teachers a little bit. I'm like, can we do a September instructional rounds? And they like had these big eyes at a staff meeting and that like, no, we don't want to do it in September. And I said, but remember, like, this is how we're learning from the strengths. And some of you, like many of you, you all actually have strengths about how you set up your classroom, how you create the culture in your class, like how you establish routines. And that's an opportunity for us to deprivatize that and see how other classrooms are doing that so we can learn and grow with that part of it. And once I said it like that, they were kind of like, yeah, you're right. We do need to get in at the beginning of the year and deprivatize that part too. And so now, like for my last several years as a principal, it was September through April, once a month, and that was the structure that we put in place.
Can I ask
There's
another question about duration, right? Because I like the idea it's not one and done. So if as you're the principal and you're listening to everyone debrief and share one thing that they want to learn about or work on, then do you observe for that either in their teaching or discuss with them one-on-one how their learning is going, or is there follow-up afterwards after they name their one thing they want to work on?
To be honest, no, I didn't follow up or structure that in that way. If I
Mhm.
did, it was more casual because I was very deliberate about not letting this feel like in any way evaluative. So I had to make
Mhm.
sure that I
Of
kept a
course.
whole different hat on my head when I was facilitating instructional rounds.
Yep.
And I was just in as a learner with them.
Yep.
But I
No.
will tell you, like there are many times where a person that was observing in the morning tried it that afternoon when we were in their classroom. They tried something and they wanted that group to see, like, I saw this morning and I'm trying it right here when you're coming in. And we got brave enough that that's where we started going, because it just became how we learned together. And if it didn't work out, that was okay too, but it usually did.
Well, and you talk about in your book, and that's where I said the idea of the pockets of excellent teaching, which
Hmm.
most leaders have in their schools. And you talked about how even for new initiatives, right,
Yes.
that it would have taken before you implemented instructional rounds a lot longer for ideas to spread across the school, good ones, new initiatives or new ideas. And now it's catching on more quickly because teachers are observing each other, right? And so then, then that teacher who tried the morning strategy in the afternoon, then other people saw, and it snowballs, as opposed to you, we need more PD or we need more observation or whatever. Instead, by teachers observing teachers doing the new effective strategy, they're seeing it in action and trying it in action. So that was an unanticipated result.
Yeah, I want to tell my numbers talk story, if that's okay, because
Yes, please.
I was trying so hard to get number talks going in our school. And I bought all my teachers the book, and the book had the DVD in it. And so at staff meetings, I play the DVD of different
You're dating yourself.
videos of people doing number talks, and
Yeah.
like literally been doing this for a year, and we're just not moving on number talks. I haven't seen it in any classrooms yet. And we go into its instructional rounds. I had no idea what Nicole was going to do, but we walked into Nicole's kindergarten class, and she held up a scatter of dots to her kindergartners and said, "What do you see and how do you see it?" And I was like, "Oh my God, it's a number talk." I was so excited. And so when we stepped outside and started talking about what we were seeing with that number talks and how students were reacting to her questioning, our teachers got really excited. Now, and my groupings, they're heterogeneous. So I had all different grade levels, and we go to all different grades because best practice is K-12. So we want to see it all over the place and leverage that in all of our classrooms. So
Mm-hmm.
even though I had fourth grade teachers and fifth grade teachers and second grade teacher there, two of them that afternoon were hosting, and they did a number talk that afternoon. And literally, um, in it caught on so fast, like within a couple months, the whole school was now doing number talks
Mm.
because one person did it at an instructional round, more people did it at the next instructional round, so more people saw it. Then they started talking to their co-teachers, and
Mm-hmm.
it was easy just because
Mm-hmm.
we saw it real quick.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it seems like this model encapsulates a lot of what the research says about effective professional learning, like what Linda Darling Hammond says, but also captures a lot of what we know about learning in general, right? So teachers are they have a great deal of choice, right? They observe a class and they are choosing what they're taking away with them. You are not saying this is the learning point, right? So they're choosing to be a part of this practice. So there's choice. It's clearly focused on content and what works in our context with our kids, right? It's not some
Yeah.
school in Singapore, it's your community, maybe students you teach. It is collaborative in that you've all seen the same segment and you're sharing your observations. You all saw the same thing. There's clearly a reflective piece both after each class and then after all of them. They're models of effective practice, right? You're not talking about it. You're seeing a teacher actually teach something effectively. There's the expert support in that you as the principal, you're coming in and thinking about what reflective questions you're going to ask and facilitating that learning. It's not just a free-for-all. So it does capture really a lot of what we know about effective professional learning and professional learning in general. So I just applaud you. That's amazing.
The other
Um,
thing about the
yeah.
expert support too is then they know which teacher to go to. Like, I just saw this in so and so's classroom. I'm going to go back to that person because I'm trying to figure this out. And
Yes.
so there's a lot more supporting each other. I want to also build on one more thing too.
Yeah.
Um, like you said, it is personalized. Like the
Mhm.
teacher's going in and they're looking for what they need to see.
Yes.
I'm looking more system wide as the facilitator, and I'm thinking, what's the high leverage practice that I want to pull out that I'm going to um, build consistency and calibrate our understanding of something in the building through our conversation, but they're also pulling out those little nuances that they need. So if I'm a newer teacher and I'm just trying to figure out how to set up my classroom or how to
Yeah.
structure some routines, or if I'm pretty solid on that, but this teacher's doing some really solid questioning of kids
Yes.
that's pulling out deeper understanding and deeper dialogue around learning. Like, so everybody's
So it's
getting what they
differentiated.
need.
You're different. It's
Yes. But
differentiated.
we're growing as a system because we're
Right.
calibrating our
Yes.
understanding of
Yes.
things.
Yes. This is our, what good teaching looks like. You're helping to define it, but it's also at the different levels. I love that. I'm going to ask two more questions before wrapping up. So, your definition of instructional rounds that you described in the book is instructional rounds are a positive, effective, and practical form of professional development in which teachers observe each other and reflect in order to grow as educators. So, fairly simple. There's no mention of leader in that definition. So, does it have to be the principal who leads the group, or what are your
No,
thoughts? Yeah.
no. Early on, we started sharing this at our principals network in Wayne County, where I live. And so some visiting county principals would come and just check out and see what I was doing when we were early into it. And one principal or a couple visiting principals asked, does it have to be the principal that does it? And I'm like, huh, I never really thought about that till you asked me that, because it was such passionate work for me that it would have been hard for me to pass it on, although I should have. And I did more towards the end. But it doesn't have to be. But I think what it does have to be is somebody that your staff will trust, someone that understands best practice, that can like find those things and pull those out and be able to phrase that into a reflected question that can get some dialogue going. And sometimes that is a principal, sometimes it's an instructional coach, sometimes it's a lead teacher that could fit that role. Well, there are a few schools that it was an aspiring principal, and they saw it at my school and they went to their principal and said, will you let me do this, because
Mhm.
I want to try this and I want to learn and I want to be a principal someday. So if you could let me do this, and they did some really great ones. And what was awesome about that is the principal joined the as a participant, while that aspiring principal played that facilitator role. And that was interesting too, because sometimes I find that some principals have a hard time getting out of their critical lens
Mhm.
and looking for all the assets and the strengths that are happening.
Mm.
And so that was just, I talked to a principal that we did it that way, where it was an aspiring principal, and that principal came on and she goes, at first it was really hard for me not to like look at what would I want to coach this teacher on, and to really say what is already happening in here that's going really well, so that we can have some strong dialogue around that and spread that pocket of greatness and make some
Yep.
blankets of greatness going across our school.
I like that, blankets. And also, what a great learning opportunity for the AP,
Yes.
or whoever's doing it. I love that. Um, the last thing I want to talk about is the unanticipated benefits of your version of instructional rounds. So we've got the professional learning opportunity. what else did you find that it led to at your school?
Um, One of the things that really stood out for me was the calibration of practice. Um, I think so many times there's a lot of things we talk about in education, and my understanding of what that looks like and sounds like might be completely different than the person next to me, than the person next to them. So one of the things that really stood out is that we started to really have a common understanding of best practice across our school. Um, Another one of the unexpected benefits was the way, I guess we did it to learn, but it changed our culture so much. People really started talking about each other by the strengths. So, remembering back to that origin story, I was merging two schools together and they didn't like each other and they did practice it. They did things very differently. It was always like we were trying to like negotiate how we're going to do things in the future in this merge. And as soon as we started taking them into each other's classrooms, they started to talk about each other through their strengths.
Yeah.
And the divide that we had going on fizzled, it dissolved so fast just within that second half of the year by conducting a few instructional rounds. Our culture became a very positive culture, and that invisible divide that we had was gone. It went away. And I'm really proud of that. It wasn't on my mind that this is what we're going to get out of this, but that's what we got out of it. It
Yeah.
was it was culture.
Yeah. And I love, it wasn't culture building by, rah, rah, rah balloons. It was culture building by, improving the school, improving the
Yeah.
practice of the professionals in the building. And, when I mentioned burnout earlier, I know a lot of people's first reaction is like, oh, my teachers are burnt out. I can't, do one more thing, or I can't be professional learning. But it is actually by treating adults as professionals, treating our teachers like professionals, and supporting them in their growth that keeps them interested in the profession and growing in March and April, May, and in year 5 and in 10 and 20. So
Yes.
I really do think this is a very strong antidote to burnout. And I think by focusing on strengths, you're teaching teachers, you're teaching people to focus on strengths, right? What you water blooms. And so you talked about building a positive culture. They're all building that muscle of focusing, first noticing, and then talking about the positive. So I think that that is a really wonderful gift, and the collaboration and trust and closeness that grew out of that. Not to mention, I think you mentioned that, when we're all teaching in schools, right, in our own classrooms and our own silos, you have stereotypes of people, right? That Vicki WIlson across the hall, I always hear her, she's so loud, right? And so you develop certain ideas and you never really see them teach, like you talked about with your friend. So once I go into Vicki's classroom, oh, she has an amazing rapport with the kids, right? What sounds like loud to me is her exuberance and her passion, right? So
Yeah.
I was going to walk away with this very stereotypical view, but instead I got the 3D view by actually going into her room and seeing her as a full, if not a full person, a full teacher. Um,
Right. You
yeah,
see them doing what they love and you
yeah.
see them interacting with their kids. But yes, I do write about that. Like I had because I taught with these teachers, I had assumptions that I had been making based on conversations in the lounge, or just the way that I hear them when I'm walking by. And so, and they weren't all, what I realized is they weren't always accurate. And when I went in with that strength lens, I saw them doing what they love and showing and shining in that way. And it that was a little, I felt bad about that because sometimes I made assumptions that didn't give them enough credit. And that was a lesson that I learned
Mm.
through this whole process is I have to, we always hear presume positive intent.
Right.
And um and it taught me that I wasn't always doing that. I was making an assumption, and until I get in there and see it, and I'm looking for strengths, I might see something totally different than what I thought I was going in there to look at.
Great. All right. I want to leave listeners with a lightning round because as soon as they finish listening to the podcast, they'll have a million things to do. So I want to leave them with one main idea of your book that's short, one high leverage action that a leader could take to start or work on this instructional rounds practice, and then one resource if they want to learn more about walkthroughs, instructional rounds.
Yes. Okay, so the big main idea definitely is lean into the strengths of those in your school. Like, go into those classrooms and look what is working here, what is going well in this classroom, and that takes you really into what can I start, might be a baby step forward as you're going into classrooms. Like, put yourself into that mindset. When I go in, what are the bright spots I'm seeing? What are the strengths that are happening in here? And maybe just start with those one-on-one conversations with that teacher about their strengths and and then dig even a little bit deeper. So if these are your strengths, what's next for you? Where do you see that going next? And take them into that conversation versus the deficit piece. The other thing is, this all falls under the umbrella of deprivatizing our practice. So sometimes if you're not ready to actually get in the classrooms right away, start thinking about structure, but then what are the opportunities at staff meetings and things like that, where people can share something that's working in their classroom around class meetings, or something that's working around in your classroom for math fluency, and they can just start talking about, here's something that worked for me. And to learn more, you can get Lead with Instructional Rounds on Amazon. I've also been digging into appreciative inquiry as well. So there's a lot of a book that I'm really liking around that is The Power of Appreciative Inquiry. The Power of Appreciative Inquiry, A Practical Guide to Positive Change, and just kind of keeping myself in that strength focus, appreciation mindset. I think just makes schools much more enjoyable and takes some of that burnout away.
Which is what we need now. Wonderful. And if people want to learn more about you and your work, Vicki, where can they go?
Thank you. So I'm on X at Vicki WIlson 5. I'm on Facebook and Instagram at Vicki Martin Wilson. And VickiWilson.org is my website.
VickiWilson.org. Okay, great. Well, thank you, Vicki. Thanks so much for taking the time to join me today. For those of you listening, thank you for taking the time as well. I know leaders listening take their professional learning seriously, so thank you for spending some of that time here with us. If you got something from this conversation, I would appreciate it if you'd share the podcast with a colleague or follow the podcast. I will be back in 2 weeks. Until then, learn more, lead better. Thank you so much, Vicki.
Thank you, Jen. It was so great to talk to you today.